Now to another big national case, Chad Daybell's triple murder trial. The jury reaching their verdict just a few hours ago, guilty on all counts. The so-called doomsday author is now convicted of murdering his wife, Lori Vallow's two kids, Tylee and JJ, who used to live right here in the Valley. He's also convicted for killing his first wife, Tammy Daybell. 12 News journalist Erica Stapleton has been on this case for the past 4 years. Erica, this verdict came down quickly.
Yeah, Tram, the jury got the case just yesterday afternoon, so they had it for less than 24 hours. And what this means is that prosecutors really laid out their case clearly, and the jury was able to use that evidence to come to their decision. To give you some background, this trial took some time, 31 days of testimony and arguments over the course of the past 2 months, each side pulling out all the stops in their cases, the state driving home their case that this was about money, power, and sex, and that Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow's dark religious beliefs led them to have an affair and get rid of anyone who could get in the way of their relationship. The defense actually calling Chad a victim, blaming the crimes on Lori Vallow and her brother, but in the end, the jury was quick to convict on 8 charges, including those 3 counts of first-degree murder.
In regards to count 2 of the amended indictment, is Chad Guy Daybell not guilty or guilty of first-degree murder of Tylee Ryan? Guilty. In regards to count 4 of the amended indictment, is Chad Guy Daybell not guilty or guilty of first-degree murder of Joshua Jackson Vallow? Guilty. Question number 6. In regards to count 6 of the amended indictment, is Chad Guy Daybell not guilty or guilty of first-degree murder of Tammy Daybell? Guilty.
Let's take another legal deep dive and bring Hector back into the conversation. Hector, we are talking less than 24 hours for this verdict to come down. Were you surprised at how fast this came in? And guilty?
No, not surprised. The prosecutors in this case had a trial involving Lori Vallow, and so they had a really good appreciation of the evidence. They, I think, also likely made adjustments in terms of what was going to be impactful here to connect Chad Daybell to this crime, recognizing that he was likely going to try to lay the blame on, his co-conspirator.
Right.
And so there was just a lot of evidence that connected Chad Daybell to beyond just simply that somehow he was a patsy or went along with this. So it's interesting, that this has come to a conclusion.
And Tram, I'll say I wasn't surprised either. I was maybe surprised more at how quickly they came to that verdict, but I wasn't surprised that it was guilty on all counts, just because, again, as Hector said, they had, this blueprint looking at Lori Vallow's case. She was convicted in this case on all counts last year. And some of the evidence that was presented, there are images, there were details about a lot of disturbing details that really stick with you as a juror. So I'm sure they considered all of that during their deliberations, and it was just a lot of evidence that stacked up.
And usually, when a verdict comes down this fast, usually, is it guilty?
Well, it's usually, in those situations, I'll tell you, I've been doing this long enough to where I try not to read the tea leaves in terms of, but there is always sometimes on the defense side that's going to be a not guilty. So maybe his lawyers thought, there was some issue there. Did they go back and look at the evidence and but there's the other side of it. Sometimes they come back, they've heard the evidence, and it's guilty.
Yeah.
It just depends on the kind of case. And here, I think there was so much evidence here that connected, this individual to acting beyond just simply, that he was going along somehow and, didn't have any involvement beyond, being with Miss Vallow. That just didn't fly.
What was interesting to Erica and I, his demeanor, how stoic, how emotionless he was throughout the entire trial.
And keep in mind, he never testified. We haven't heard much from him on any of this. So to see him sitting there even through the verdict being read.
Is that something, I'm just wondering, as a criminal defense attorney, is that something that you would tell your clients or discourage?
I try to tell my clients when you're waiting there, it's a very stressful when you're waiting for a verdict, and you're hoping for that not guilty based on the evidence, and you're sitting there and the jury comes in, and you never know how a defendant's going to act. You tell them, hey, listen, let's show respect to the court, to the jurors that are going to come in. Don't if it doesn't go our way, we want to be to maintain our composure.
Okay.
And so that may have been some of the instruction. Who knows? This person could be medicated for all we know in terms of, he is incarcerated and there are a lot of things going on. But yeah,
I do want to add quickly, Hector and Tram, that this isn't over just yet. We're now moving into the sentencing phase of this case. Chad Daybell could be facing the death penalty here, and the same jury that just convicted him on all counts will be deciding if the death penalty is just on those murder and conspiracy charges. So I'm wondering if the speed in which they convicted him here might have any bearing on a decision.
Always plays into it.
For the death
plays
penalty.
Into it. It also, to your point, in terms of how he acted, that was in front of that same jury that's going to decide his fate. They are going to sit and weigh aggravating, mitigating factors now. It becomes a mini trial, and they're going to hear from other witnesses in terms of Chad Daybell's actions. There's going to be evidence that didn't come in during the trial about his character. And they're going to have to decide. They only have to find one aggravator in terms of whether to impose the death penalty. And that could be, for instance, the nature of this crime, that it was cruel and depraved. Was there some kind of financial motive, backing this? We heard about some insurance issues there. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I wouldn't be surprised, given the facts that we know about this case, that they do find Chad Daybell here and impose the death penalty.
And that portion will continue tomorrow morning, so it's going to be moving right along.
Right. All right. Erica, thank you so much. Hector, I know you're going to stay with us for even more cases. Up next,